Welcome and thank you very much for joining our remote roundtable for April. My name is Jeff Harris. I'm one of the co-founders of Xello, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to be with all of you today. This is an interesting time in the school year where it's starting to wind down. There's still lots of work to do, but as the year begins to wrap up in the coming weeks or a month or so, it can be a really good time for reflection to kind of think back to, wow, what really worked well this school year? What didn't work? What had I hoped to do, but I just couldn't find time to do? And what new priorities have emerged? What kinds of things do I think I might want to tackle next year? So that reflection can spark a lot of new ideas and new thinking and things for you to kind of ponder over the summer as you put your plans together. And it's that process that we'd really like to focus on here today. We're very pleased to have a great group of panelists who can help us tackle this important topic. So just a couple of words about the format today. It's 1 hour in duration. We have 5 minutes for introductions, and we're getting through that right now. And then we'll have 40 minutes set aside for a panel discussion, so posing questions for our panelists. And then at the end, we've set aside 15 minutes for any questions that you may have. So as I mentioned, feel free to add questions in the chat during the session. We have staff who are taking care of the chat, who can answer your questions on the fly. We'll also keep some questions for our panelists aside until the end and post those to the group. For those of you who don't know much about Xello, just a few quick words about who we are. We're a mission-driven company with a singular focus on empowering students to create their successful future. We've been doing this now for almost 25 years. We're very fortunate to have had an opportunity to be part of education and career development in particular for that time. It's truly a labor of love for all of us. And even though we've spent so much time in it, there's always new things to learn. It's just an amazing field. We feel very fortunate. So now on to the good stuff. Really pleased today to be joined by two educators who have years of experience delivering career development in their school, in their district. Kelsey and Betsy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We really appreciate it. And if you don't mind, maybe just give you a couple of minutes to quickly introduce yourselves, if that's okay. Betsy, maybe start with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Betsy Kanagawa. I'm a school counselor in Woodhaven, Michigan at Patrick Henry Middle School. We are an 8th and 9th grade middle school, which is a little non-traditional. We have about 840 students and 2 school counselors, and myself and my co-counselor are pretty much responsible for the college and career readiness programming at our school. I've been here for over 10 years. I was a teacher before that.
That's great. Thanks so much, Betsy. Kelsey, over to you.
Everybody, I'm Kelsey Park. I am the current CTE director and assistant principal in University Place School District at Curtis Senior High School. We serve about 1,300 students right now at Curtis High School, and I oversee our CTE program for the district, as well as support our teachers and our staff with the implementation of High School and Beyond plan here.
That's great. We're going to get a bit of a middle school, high school perspective, which is really helpful. We also have on the line with us today a longtime Xellian and an amazing trainer, Julia. I'd like to say hello to Julia if you want to just introduce yourself as well.
Hi there, my name is Julia, and I'm one of the Xello training specialists here. I've been with Xello for close to 6 years now, and worked with a number of districts in Michigan as well as across the US. So thrilled to be here today.
Amazing. Okay, so with the introductions, now we can jump into the content. And let's start off with our first question. So if you don't mind, Betsy and Kelsey, just maybe tell us a little bit about your district or your school's college and career readiness program, just to give everyone on the line a little bit of perspective on the things that you're focused on, the goals that are most important to you around career development in your school or district. Kelsey, maybe we'll start with you if that's okay.
So thank you for having me here today. For our district, so at the high school level, we have been really focused on making sure that we are authentically fulfilling the high school and beyond plan for our students. So making sure that they are engaged in an authentic way, having real life connections with the program, and their planning beyond. So that's looked a lot for us in the past 5 years of implementation for this, working through how do we intentionally build Xello into currently existing curriculum so that it becomes something that's authentic, that our teachers and our students can get into, so it doesn't become a hoop anymore. And then also we've spent a lot of time looking at our students with the highest need, especially our 18 to 21-year-old program, and saying, you know, they are still a part of our system. They are planning for their futures. How do we engage them, and how do we help support our special education caseworkers and managers with utilizing this tool to help support them in their transition planning. So that's a lot of the work that we've been doing in UP School District with Xello right now.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. It's really interesting how you call out doing it in an authentic way, and how that's important. We could probably talk about that for a long time, but really interesting that you've made that distinction and have felt like that's important. Maybe if you don't mind just quickly sharing how you came to that conclusion within the district that it was important to do this in an authentic way.
Yeah, so we, looking at our leaver data for our special education students, realized that we were not getting as many students out into the community or out into secondary workforce or education as we wanted to. And that was our first little indicator. And then we were also seeing that our completion numbers from 8 through 12 were not consistent. We were seeing a really big push in 12th grade to finish this high school and beyond plan. And that was because it's a graduation requirement. And so we started to think, well, how could we be more proactive and plan ahead so that all of our students are getting access to this sooner? And then really thinking about, like, where does this already fit in things that we're already doing? I'm a big advocate for multiple birds, one stone, really thinking systemic efficiency. And so that's what kind of cued us into a need for a shift in that work. We also noticed that our special education case managers were implementing T-Folio and career match surveys independently. And so they were doing really hard work that we already had existing in a program. And so some of it was really just finding where we already have the tools and resources and getting that support for our staff so that students could be engaged in it in a more regular fashion.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
Betsy, do you mind sharing a little bit about the career programming that you're delivering in your area?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Because my camera stopped working.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. So yeah, so we're actually a little bit new in our programming. We used to have a course that all students were required to complete that did all of the college and career readiness. But then we got rid of that class. And so it was up to the school counselors to begin to decide how to implement college and career readiness. We just became a Xello school last year, which is a great time to do that with the pandemic and so many kids being home. And Xello was so helpful as far as having something that we could access for all students. And so I feel like our biggest thing is very similar to Kelsey's, actually, finding a way to make it meaningful, that we're not just doing, you know, assigning a unit for all students just to do and then move on to something else. And with social emotional learning and mental health being so important as well, finding ways to integrate college and career readiness, not just as its own like box, but how can we integrate that into everything we do? And so our school mission, you know, is your future starts now. And so what a great mission to drive everything that we do related to college and career readiness. You know, so we want that really to be the mindset that we want equity for all students to be able to obtain their next goal, no matter what they look like or where they come from. How can we make something that they see as a possibility for their future? How do we make sure that they're finding their curriculum accessible to them, no matter what learning differences they have or what family supports they have? So I think looking at it as the whole picture of what a student needs to take their next step. And for us being 8th and 9th grade, you know, we're transitioning them to high school after they've already had a year of credits. And so making sure that they have a good understanding of what they need to graduate, that they're taking advantage of all the opportunities we offer in our district, college program and that sort of thing, that they're aware and they're making the most of the time that we have them in our school.
Amazing. It's so great to hear. I mean, so often the focus has been on just getting things done. I mean, giving students an opportunity to complete a career assessment or to do some career research, but to move beyond that and really focus on the quality and to be looking at the outcomes and seeing that it's not reaching all students, or it's not making a meaningful difference in the choices that they're making or how informed they are, and therefore we need to do a better job. It's incredibly exciting to see that. So one of the things that we were wondering about is, coming into this past school year, did you have some new initiatives, some new things that you wanted to do with your career and college readiness program? Just anything you can share about that? Did you have new goals coming into this year over last year? Maybe Betsy, we'll stay with you for that.
Yeah, so that was the big thing, is we wanted to find a way to integrate the programming and our college and career readiness with our SEL program. And so every time we come in, so we do a lot of tier 1 classroom lessons. We try to get into the classroom at least once a month for all students. And so every time we did that, we wanted to have some SEL components, but also how to my success in the future. How can I relate this to something that's going to help me in the workplace or in a college setting? Because we know that college students won't be college and career readiness, or won't be college and career ready unless they have the social emotional skills to get along with others, to manage their emotions in a healthy way, to understand who they are and understand how to get along with others. And so that was kind of our goal in this year, is how do we combine those two efforts into a more comprehensive lesson for students? And so on the next slide, I kind of showed a little bit about how we did that. But so that was one goal. And then again, how can we have a school culture of your future starts now, and everything we're doing is helping you take a next step. Every test that you take is, there's something that your teacher wants you to learn as far as the curriculum, but this is something that maybe will help you in the future. We want you to be strong writers. We want you to have these analytic skills and be able to integrate this information into make it meaningful for them. Just like Kelsey said, we want it to be something that they see the purpose of that, in their future. And then the other thing is just having our advisory council. How can we make sure that we have an advisory council for our counseling department? So we have stakeholders, parents, teachers, students, community members. We want to hear, what is it that we're not, kind of getting the mark on? What are we not hitting the mark on? And how can we integrate that better into our program? And so making that part of our advisory council, here's the things we're seeing as far as our data. How can we best meet students' needs in ways that we're maybe missing? And so honestly, the student feedback is the best part for us. Where do students feel like they need more help? We think we're doing a great job, but they're like, that career day was awful. Just as an example, they were like, oh, that wasn't fun, or we didn't like that, or here's how we could make it better. We really need student feedback, because this is their education and their experience, and they're the best ones to tell us how to make it better for them. So I just put together on this slide a little timeline of how we integrate some of the Xello lessons into our social emotional lessons. In October, a lot of schools do bullying prevention stuff because of national dates, and so that's a great time for us to do the self-advocacy lesson that Xello does for 8th grade, along with our bullying topic. And so we're talking about others, but also advocating for ourselves, not just in a sense of bullying, but in the workplace. We'll have to use this in the future as a skill. Thinking about another one that we did was looking at skills, but doing that along with social self-esteem lessons. We're looking at self-esteem. How do we build ourselves up? Well, what are my skills that make me unique that I can draw upon to build more self-esteem? So that's just some of how we integrate some of the Xello lessons into the SEL lessons that we're already doing. And then even if we're doing something like on depression or anxiety, well, what are some career fields that maybe have higher rates of anxiety? And how can I prepare myself with good coping strategies? So if I'm going into a high stress job, which most jobs are high stress, I need to have the coping skills to deal with that. So we just try to make that a part of everything that we do. And then we have a homeroom time new this year as well. And so integrating some of that in the homeroom where the teachers are implementing that and making sure that they see the whole picture for students as well.
Oh, it's really helpful. I love the connection with social emotional learning. I think was it Kelsey who said, you have an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, and that's really a prime example of that. I think this is a connection that's been made in more recent years, but it's hard to imagine one without the other at this point, to be honest. There's so much overlap. I also really love the idea of trying to introduce relevancy by bringing the career development elements into different aspects of students' education experience. So, such a great idea, and I hope that students are starting to see those connections.
Absolutely.
Kelsey, any things that you wanted to mention in terms of new initiatives or new areas of focus for you this past year?
Yeah, I appreciate Betsy. Just like you talked about curricular access, and one of our big pushes with Xello and going into kind of finalizing this year was we actually built a different school institution so that our students could have access to the Xello programming K-12 based on their own ability levels, so that we could have students who needed the second grade curriculum who may be in our high school programs right now, so that they could all engage authentically. And so that was a big shift. Rather than just trying to modify what was existing, we worked really hard with Xello to get our hands on the curriculum that would best fit our students' needs. And we've seen, Betsy talked about the outcomes that she's seen with that student engagement and saying what they liked most. And I concur that seeing our students, especially our students with IEPs, doing self-led IEPs and reflecting on what they've done in this, and students who may be nonverbal, being able to go in and say and pull up their interests, their categories that they want to do in school, what they like to do outside of school, and being able to clearly articulate that with examples that they've pulled in has been a huge shift for us and our ability to engage with all levels of students. So it's really becoming more inclusive and breaking down those barriers so that everybody has access to that. But that's definitely taken a lot of work with our special programs PLC. There were meetings weekly that I was involved in so that we could really look at the highest need and kind of backward plan from there, because we knew our gen ed students were engaging for the most part up until that 12th grade year. And so we really had to start thinking the smallest grain and then building back off of that. And so we've seen some really great outcomes from doing it that way. We also this year and I think every year, we've started to continue to fold in our lessons similar to what Betsy's done. And I love the homeroom setup and that ability to partner it with SEL learning. I think that's so important. So we've really taken, like in 11th grade this year, we've just kind of unpacked that. They write an essay every year about college readiness and prep for their college entrance letters that they draft up. And so there's a lesson in Xello that ties into your career goals and your first and second choices of your pathway. And so getting teachers involved in learning the lessons that Xello actually provides in there and how they can integrate that with what they're already doing. We also build in all of our 10th grade lessons into our 10th grade health curriculum. So that way students, when they're working on wellness, and again, Betsy, this is super similar to you, students are working on wellness, and then they're also thinking about job skills, what they're planning for, how they're starting their year, what are their learning styles, what are the ways that they can engage with their teachers so that they can advocate for better learning ways. And every 10th grader goes through health. And so we know that every 10th grader now starts their Xello lesson and starts engaging with career planning at that point.
Oh, that's great, Kelsey. Yeah, thanks so much. I love your focus on trying to get away from grade level and think about what the student needs developmentally, wherever they're at, and trying to use the program to meet them where they're at. Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's a learning for us. As you know, it's been, Xello is really set up with a grade level structure, and that's typically how it works. I'm glad we've been able to work together to find a way or to make that work for you. So anytime you try to do something new, you certainly don't snap your fingers and it just happens. We know that it's really challenging. So as you expanded in these different ways this past year and integrated Xello really tightly, I mean, just based on how you're talking about it, into many areas of the student's education experience. Are there any key learnings that you might want to take away? Any hard-earned lessons that people could benefit from? Maybe keep it with you, Kelsey, for that one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'd say ours is a 5-year process that we've kind of been going through, shifting from Career Cruiser into Xello. And so I think my biggest key learning for everybody is don't expect this to happen with fidelity overnight, and be okay with taking this at one grain size at a time with your implementation, right? So our first steps were making sure that we used it for our course planner. That was our primary goal, and getting 12th graders in there. And then like kind of looking at our data and saying, where can we start the shifts next? And I think that if you go too fast in those next steps with rollout, and you don't have the most important people at those table with the buy-in, then you have to slow down. You have to be willing to do that so that it's done right, so that things are communicated out right. And we're still working on that. We're still working on making sure that authentic engagement happens. So right now our high school is 10-12. So this is another similarity, Betsy. So our junior high is 8-9. And so we're still working on what does that look like to get to know their curriculum more? How do we help support that work? Because then this is going to be, it could be seen as one more thing that we have to do. Rather, this can help support you as a tool with what you're already doing. So I'd say those are some of my key takeaways from that.
I love those points, Kelsey. I so often when we're talking to people from schools and districts, they maybe didn't achieve all the goals that they set out for themselves, but it's the forward progress, and it's just that sense of we're still making a difference, and you can see that difference, right? And it is hard, but if you can make changes, lasting changes that stick, it's a really big deal for students. So, I mean, can't be too hard on ourselves, and we have to really appreciate the wins that we're able to make along the way, I think. Betsy, any key learnings that you may want to share on based on your experiences with trying to expand your use of the program?
Yeah, mine is honestly, again, Kelsey, I think we're living the same year, but so we tried to launch, so we tried to launch Course Planner this year for the first time, and the same thing where we wanted to get it all done, and we wanted to register all of our students 8 through 12, or 8 through 11, really using Course Planner, and our pupil accounting person who would do the technical side of loading the students, they left and we didn't have somebody, and then we had count day, which took up a lot. So it just didn't happen this year, and so I'm the type of person, when I want to do something, I'm just like ready to go for it and move ahead faster versus smarter, and so I think the same thing, where like sometimes you have to take a step back and what is the most important thing I need to do? And I think just trying to find something every year that you want to try to implement, but not like change your whole program overnight. Like it is kind of a start slow to get ahead approach. And I think the other thing at the middle school level is that we know that developmentally students at the middle school level are so influenced by their peers. And when it comes to future planning, they're so influenced by their peers. If we're going to have a career day and give them a choice of where to go, they're going to go where their friends are going, not necessarily where they know is the right, I'm really interested in this career. Or when they're signing up for courses, I'm going to do what my friends are doing versus what I know, like I've never sung a note, but I'm going to do choir. I'm going to try it because my friend's in there. And then we're not friends anymore. And now I'm miserable. So I think really partnering with parents to make sure that they understand the options and that they're a part of all of these big decisions we're asking students to think about, so that they can help guide some of those conversations, because they're going to know their student better than we do. And they're going to have a lot of really good insight into what's best for their students. And so I feel like, when students register, we want a parent signature, and sometimes we'll take it without the parent signature, but it is so important to make sure that they're a part of those conversations. So having something like an advisory where parents are invited to come in and be part of your programming and part of the changes and just the oversight of the programming, I think is really powerful, especially at this level, and even into the high school level. We know it's hard to engage parents sometimes, but thinking about, their future is something they definitely want to be a part of. We just have to find ways to make it accessible to the parents.
I love those comments. I especially love the concept of having conversations with students. And a lot of times we think, well, we have a program and the program is going to do a lot of these things for us, and it's going to do some things, but it's not going to have a conversation with the students and or the parents. And you see how you know, how ideas, notions that students have really come to the surface in these conversations, and those are real learning opportunities to kind of pivot and make a better plan for moving forward. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. One of the things that always comes up is whenever you're trying to make these changes, especially the changes that you've both been describing that are really systemic, within your schools. It's not just you making these things happen on your own, you're involving other educators. And so they have to be brought on board. You have to communicate and collaborate with them. And so I don't know what kind of techniques each of you have used this past year to involve the educators around you to make career development part of what they do. For many, it'll be something that's brand new. It's not part of their traditional education experience. And so I don't know, maybe you can share a bit of advice and your experiences on what that's been like trying to communicate and involve your fellow educators. Kelsey, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really been, I'm really fortunate to have really supportive executive director and district level support with this kind of saying, what are your ideas? What do you think? What kind of transition are we looking at? And so through that process, when we started going through the adoption of Xello, it was making sure the people who are going to use it most were at the table too. So district admin, as well as the high school admin were there, and all of our counselors for 8 through 12, because those would be the people who would be using this the most and having those conversations that you're talking about, Betsy, with families, really engaging students in more dialogue about it. So when we first went through this process, it was really primarily, what does this look like and how does this look like? And then being able to kind of refine what will those expectations be, and then coming up with, we worked this year to create some one-sheeters that are in different languages for our families to be able to say, here's what this looks like in your year, here's what it looks like for your whole experience at the high school, 8 through 12, and then partnering with the teachers to say, so one of the documents that I've got in here is kind of a curriculum map that we've developed at our district level to say, if you are an IEP student or if you are a case manager, here's where this lesson fits into these transition IEP high school beyond requirements. So we tried to make it as explicit as possible. And then we've just started opening our doors to invite in families, and we did a ELL focused night recently to invite them in to have those conversations with translation available, to be able to help bridge some of those systemic gaps that we see and where there are most barriers. So it's been, it's a slower process, but really looking at what is working and what's working around you, and then trying not to recreate the wheel, but really making sure you're most efficient and effective.
Sounds great. Did you find that having some existing awareness around the high school and beyond plan, did that help to some extent? Just, people who know that this is something that needs to be done, and so they're already thinking about that, or yeah, just wondering how much that helps you.
It's hit or miss, especially with pandemic, right? So coming out on the other side, and last year we went fully online with our lessons, so it all also looked really different. And so it's kind of just depended on if they've had people, if families have been in our system for a long time, they've typically known like, oh yeah, I've got to do a high school beyond plan. But it has previously been just the check the box that you've got your volunteer hours and then you've done your resume. And so it has been making sure that you have more frequent conversations. One of our plans for our upcoming orientation days is to actually have that be front and foremost a stop that they need to stop in and see our career center counselor about, and make sure that they have the information and that they have access to Xello. We've also just rolled out the parent portal to all of our families. So we're excited to see how that kind of also helps bring awareness and starts to shape some conversations differently. But it definitely, it's definitely hit or miss right now. It just depends on the families.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of times we think having the initiative in place is going to kind of do the job, but I think we're learning in our conversation with both of you today, that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of work to do to get that kind of implementation with fidelity that you are both striving for clearly. Betsy, congratulations on getting your camera working. And nice to see you again. Any thoughts from you in terms of how you've been able to involve others at your schools and get them involved as well?
Guys, I was sweating. My whole thing stopped working. I was having some major tech problems, but I'm glad I'm back. So yeah, so like I said, like our advisory is a huge way that we try to get feedback on our program to drive changes. But we have a newsletter. We use SMORE just because then we can get statistics on how many people are viewing it. We send that to parents every month. We try to have some sort of update that addresses the different components of our program. And then we try to have a little time at staff meetings where we're talking to staff about what's coming up. And again, just creating that culture of a school whose purpose is preparing students for their next step, and that your future starts here. And that's part of it. We need some plans for the future. We need some pathways to get there. We need to look at how we're preparing them and adjust as we feel like we're not meeting students' needs, and celebrate the ways that we are. And just kind of being a team on all of that. And I know that can be a barrier for some people, creating that culture, because it's not something that one person can do by themselves, but just making sure that everything you do is with that future focus.
Oh, wow. It's amazing. I love that idea of creating a culture of career development. And that, of course, is not easy, but certainly a very worthwhile goal. One of the things that we're lucky to have Julie here today, because when it comes to communicating with others in your school or district about what's happening with Xello, a lot of times people want to see the data, right? They want to know what's actually happening, what kind of reporting capabilities exist, so that we can get some information out of Xello about what's been going on with the program. So I'm going to turn it over to Julia, who can walk us through just a few quick highlights of some of the reporting that's available to you in Xello when you get those kinds of questions.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Jeff. Yeah, as a training specialist, I just wanted to share a few ways that Xello can specifically support you. So Xello Reports are an amazing way to gain insights about your students and the work that they're doing within Xello. An amazing feature of the reporting is that there's functionality to narrow down what you're looking for through the filtering option. And you can always export any of our reports to an Excel or a CSV file to be able to manipulate the data in any way you need and share with educators, or even share with states if you need for state mandates. I just want to highlight 3 key reports, which can all be found in the educator dashboard. So the first one that you see on the screen now is our engagement report. And this allows you to track the number of students who log into Xello in an academic year. So you can track which students log in multiple times, and then those who might need a little bit more encouragement. Logins in this case are broken down by day, month, and by student. So there's lots of ways to slice the data. And reports are available for every year that you use Xello. So you can see usage year over year, and many districts use this increased usage, hopefully year over year, for funding purposes, to show that the program is being utilized, and for grant information. The next report are the student work reports. And this is basically aggregate information of all of the great work that your students are doing within the program. You're going to gain insights on the top saved schools that your students are looking at, all of your students' learning styles at aggregate, what skills your students are identifying. So you can really use this reporting to see trends and to see groups of students that are similar. Then the third report here that I wanted to highlight, excuse me, are the lesson progress reports. So these reports are a quick and easy way to track the progress of your students' work in lessons. You can use this reporting to see how many students have not started their lessons in Xello, how many are in progress, and how many have actually completed the lessons. You can narrow down all of this functionality by site. If you're at the district level, you can narrow down the searching by lesson, by grade, or even by individual student. And lesson completion is often aligned to state mandates. So by being able to pull lesson completion reports, this can show that students have met the necessary requirements for state mandates. It sounds like this has been used quite a lot with Betsy, which is great. I also wanted to take a quick moment to share that if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the reporting functionality within Xello in order to kind of help wrap up your end of year, we are having a live web training on May 11th. And I believe my colleague Dion is putting the link, the registration link, into the chat. So there will be an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into all the great reporting functionality within Xello. Thanks, Jeff.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Julia. Lots of helpful reports there. I think the student work data is really interesting, gives you a good feel for the interests and aspirations of your students. It makes me think, you do remember I said at the start, I've been doing this for 25 years. So when I think back to the early days of technology, I remember meeting with a large district that had someone at the district level whose job for about 50% of the year was trying to understand gender patterns in career choices across the district. And so it was really hard for them to do, took a lot of their time. They were amazed when they could kind of pull a single report in the program and be able to see that data kind of all at once. So it does give you a lot of insight just into the aspirations that exist. And of course, you can tailor your programming in response to that. So as we start to get close to the end of the school year, maybe it doesn't feel like we're quite there yet, but just wondering, in your school, in your district, what are some of the main things that you want to focus on with your current college readiness programming as the year starts to wind down? Betsy, maybe start with you.
Yeah, so I am really hoping to get some more training on the parent portal so that we can better, resource our parents with that information. Another thing that I'm hoping to do is putting together, you get all that information on summer programs and camps for teens. And one of my goals is to use the reports to identify which camps would be appropriate for which students. So my students that are interested in kind of STEM related careers, send them the information on the STEM camps, and the students that are more into artistic careers, are there any art camps going on, and trying to find them some summer programming that would be meaningful and kind of directly relate to the things of their future. That's always one of those goals though that I'm like, I hope I could get there, but that's definitely something I would like to do by the end of the year. And then of course, we're just looking to make sure our students are ready for the transition to the next building and for their next step there, and that they're on track to be a sophomore when they get there. That's so crazy, Kelsey, that your school is 10 through 12. That's very unique for us. I don't know about you guys over there, but yeah, so those are the things that I'm most concerned about and just hoping to do by the end of the year.
Awesome, thanks so much. Kelsey, anything top of mind for you as we head into the final month or so?
Yeah, we right now are actually accessing those reports that were shared on a daily basis to track our seniors specifically and see who we still need to pull in and talk to about completing their lessons and their resume and getting those items kind of finished off for them. We also, we built in with Xello, we use the work experiences area for our volunteer service hours. So that's kind of how we track. And so we're always looking through there, and we're currently working with Xello to figure out if there's another way for us to be able to pull that information quicker. So I also appreciate that Xello is always willing to try and work and kind of figure out solutions. But that's our big push right now. And then getting ready for going down to the junior high to actually start to work with them and getting those 8th graders going into it by the end of the year so that they know how to log in and they can start working on that during summer and right at the start. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks so much. It sounds like lots of activities are still planned, and preparation activities both for the summer and for students making a transition. Just wanted to kind of pick up on that theme and say a couple of things. So of course, it's a time of transition for all students as they're moving from one grade to the next. But for some students, it's a bigger transition year if they're moving from elementary school to middle school or middle school to high school, or of course, from grade 12 into whatever comes next for them. So it is a time of big transitions for students. sometimes that's a little bit scary. You're used to what you know, and now it's something different, and that can be a really hard time. And so helping students prepare for those transitions is certainly important. That's one of the themes that's important for us when we build lessons and activities for students. And so we just wanted to take a minute for Julia to walk us through some of the lessons and missions that are available in Xello to help those transitioning students.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeff. So we have a number of ways to help support your students throughout those transitional years. And one great example is a brand new mission that we launched this year for our 3 to 5 students in grade 3 to 5. This is a grade 5 lesson called Learning Paths. And this is where students will identify types of education and training pathways to help prepare for careers. So this is a great introduction, but also a great lead up to our middle school lessons, or middle school lesson, which is called Discovering Learning Pathways. So this is a grade 5 lesson supporting grade 6. Then for those students in grade 8 that are going on to grade 9, this is one of my favorites. We have a transition to high school lesson. And this is an opportunity for students to share what they're excited about, what they're nervous about or what they're anxious about, and explore ways that they can handle their anxieties and handle that sort of successful transition, and also develop strategies in order to make that transition to high school even more seamless. And as educators, you've got the ability to see all the answers that your students are writing. So this is an opportunity for you to see exactly what they're excited and anxious about. The last slide that I have here is how to support students in transitions. This is something new. So as educators, you have the ability to view student profiles to learn more about them. Something we've just added, so new functionality, allows you to view work from past grades. So not only can you see what your student has kind of worked on and captured in their current grade year, but also you can now reflect back. So this is a great way for you to get a sense of where the student came from to be able to support them and get a sense of really where they're going. So our program really is geared towards helping students in all areas, but especially those transitional years.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julia. We're really excited about starting to really knit together the different versions and different experiences of Xello from a data and reporting perspective, so that we can provide educators and administrators with that full K-12 view of students and kind of see how their interests change over time, and get a lot of insight into kind of who they are. So another question just in this theme of transitions and preparing for next year. When you think about next year's goals, you both had ambitious goals this year. You've accomplished a lot this year in terms of integrating career development more systemically and more organically and naturally into your schools. Have you thought yet about what you might want to do next year, and how do you think you'll prepare for whatever changes you may want to make during the coming year? Betsy, maybe start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think, since we weren't able to officially launch Course Planner, that would be a goal for next year, is to learn enough about that we're ready to hit the ground running with that and get kids, how we currently do our 5-year planning, help them transition into using the Course Planner for that. So I would definitely love to be ready to do that next year. I think also, another thing is I'm going to get to know Kelsey a little better because I want to steal all her ideas. But I think just finding ways to connect with other people who are doing the type of work that I want to be doing. I love the opportunity that Xello provides to connect with other educators, in this way nationally, to hear some ideas of what they're doing. So that's always my goal in the summer, is to continue networking, hearing what is the next new best thing or best practice and way to engage students in their next steps. So I think that would be my goal. We usually do like a staff book study. So I don't know if it would be something related to this, but I'm looking for something that'll just be meaningful to help us grow a little bit and be ready for next year. I can't believe that we're already thinking about summer plans and next year. And I think just looking at our data for this year and what does that mean we need to change next year? Where can we improve, or where did we fall short and we need to And you know what else I'm going to be doing is looking for more school counselors to come to our school. Can they hire more of us so we can do all of this work in more time? And I think advocating for a Xello at the elementary level. Our career development does not start until middle school, and it's such a shame they don't come with a foundation. And I think the stuff Xello provides at the elementary level would be, I mean, my kids are in elementary, and so I would love for them to be able to go through some of this and set that framework. So when they come to me, this isn't the first time they're hearing and asking, being asked some of these questions and to think about themselves in this way. So I'm going to be thinking about how to get that at our elementary school when we don't have any school counselors there.
Yeah, no, we can help with that too. We've had, and we really asked ourselves that question when we thought about making a program for K-5. We wondered how that would work, but of course districts are figuring it out, and we're so impressed with the methods that have been put in place and how they've found a way to work that into the programming for K-5 students. And I think it really speaks to the point about culture change. When you have students who right from day one have that kind of exposure and an opportunity to participate in career development in some way, it feels like a natural part of the education experience for them when it starts so early. So Kelsey, over to you. Any big priorities for you coming into thinking about when you think about next year, or are you still mulling it over and reflecting, or yeah, any thoughts?
I think definitely Betsy and I are going to be spending some time this summer connecting on what she's doing, and so that I can make sure that my gaps are covered. I think that that's the biggest thing, is finding those resources to kind of fill the holes so that I'm not recreating that wheel. Like you said, there are districts out there who are doing great things already. And so if I can adopt and help make that work in our system, that's definitely something I'm going to be doing. The other part is that I strongly encourage everyone to do all of your lessons. Like, that is the one thing that I keep coming back to in the summertime when I'm running summer school, is like, I'm going to go back through all the lessons. And especially with our special ed kids, if you're considering adopting the different grade levels for based on students' abilities and levels, go through those lessons so that you're familiar with what they're going to encounter, because that was super eye-opening when we were developing our district plan. And then our helping my teachers go through each of the lessons and helping make sure my new teachers are aware of what tools, like we keep unpacking those tools from Xello. So that's kind of what my planning looks like for this summer.
Oh, that's really great advice, to experience it as a student, so you really understand what they're going through and what that experience is going to be like for them. And sometimes the summer may be the only chance you have to do that. So I think that's great advice. Put this up here a little bit sheepishly, because it is a really, from a high level, kind of simple and rational process that you might go through when thinking about launching a new initiative. But for what it's worth, we'll share this. So, I think just being really clear about what the goals are. And I think one of the things we discussed is you don't need to be too ambitious. So having some realistic and achievable goals, I think, is really important, and making sure that people are bought into those goals, that there's this kind of collective appreciation of the value of those goals. I think someone had mentioned earlier about, looking for ways to connect to existing learning outcomes. So not trying to add work to people, but trying to find ways to make this fit with activities that are already happening. So it's a more efficient way to do things that you already have to do. So, working smarter, not harder, I think is really, really important when you think about your goals. And there does need, I think, to be some kind of an action plan. Someone has to own these things, and whoever that is needs to be supported. They need to be, feel like they have the resources they need. They need to understand the program, feel very comfortable with it, and we do have lots of resources to help with that. But someone needs to introduce them to those resources, which is really, really important, I think. And then another thing that we've talked about a lot today is how this is such an incremental process, how it's bit by bit. You don't just turn on Xello and start doing everything that you dreamed you were going to do. You're really building a foundation each year that you can continue to grow in an incremental way, which is, I think, really important. So just having that growth focus and openness to doing things in an incremental way, and adding that next most important thing, that next high value activity. That's what you want kind of to be your priority, so that everyone thinks it's worth their time. One other thing I would just mention is all of you on the line today will have a success manager looking after your school. They're looking after your district here at Xello, and that's a huge part of their job, is to help you figure out how to get more value and how to accomplish any new initiative that's a priority for you. So don't hesitate to contact them. Kelsey and Betsy have figured out through this call that they're going to connect with each other, but our success managers can connect you to any like-minded educator who may be doing something similar to you. They're happy to help make those connections. So don't hesitate to make use of them. Julia, did you want to speak about these resources?
Absolutely. So I just wanted to share that on our Xello support site, which is help.xello.world, we have put together, we've done a lot of the heavy lifting for you, but we've put together a number of resources that can help you bring Xello to your districts as well. So the first link you see here is bringing Xello to life in your schools. So this is a quick tips and best practices catalog. We've got some resources for K-5. You'll see the next link is how to leverage Xello to support special education students. So really helping all students. Something new that may help with summer planning is our new Xello lesson pacing guide. This was just launched on our site, so that could help with some of the planning. Of course, we have a work-based learning module. So we've got some information here on our work-based learning. And finally, we do have some state-specific resources. So once again, if you go to help.xello.world and in the search field, type in your state, you may find some specific resources that we have created for you. So take a peek there before you get started.
Thanks so much, Julia. So we have about 7 minutes left, and there are a few questions that have come in. But before we get to that, just wanted to give both of you a chance to offer any final advice that you may have before we jump into the questions. So for everyone who's on the line today and is thinking about their plans for next year and how they're going to level up their programming and make some kind of incremental progress, whatever is important to them, any advice that you might want to share? Betsy, start with you.
Yeah, I think kind of like Kelsey mentioned earlier, anytime you're trying to launch something new, come up with that action plan, but then take it a step at a time and have grace on yourself if, it's not going, or the school year got really busy and we kind of slacked on some of that, but just keep that like a goal for yourself in mind and have that kind of drive the programming that you're offering or any changes you're trying to bring. But I think also, I think the big thing we're trying to shift to is not just like college and career readiness, SEL, mental health, schedule, putting all these things in boxes, but how can all of this be a comprehensive thing that drives everything we do? So how can every college and career readiness lesson also be an SEL lesson and vice versa? And how can we integrate those things so that kids can see the big picture? Because we can kind of see it and we don't even always see it. We always kind of see, oh, well, this is the one thing I have to do. And then this is, but how can we create that for our students so they see the whole picture and what this is all about, and see that their future is just a few steps away, and we are doing our best to make sure that you end up on the path that you deserve to have, and that there's nothing that's limiting you from that path. And if there is, what are we going to do to knock it down?
That's great advice. I love taking that holistic view and figuring out how it fits with everything else, getting out of those boxes. Kelsey, any final advice you'd like to share?
No, I think I 100% agree with Betsy. I could not nod enough in hearing that. It just, give yourself some grace. Don't do this on your own. You have experts in your building that know, especially at the high school level, that know the timelines of external elements. So use your team to help you build that foundation so that it is tier 1. But yep, yeah.
No, I love that advice, because nobody needs to hear about something new, something else that they have to do that's just adding on top of the heap of work that they already have. So you really have to figure out strategically how to do this in a smart way and how it fits with work that your colleagues are doing and how it can really create a better experience for students. If we could just integrate this in a smart way, it will show the relevance, for their career planning and hopefully make it more interesting and engaging for students. So yeah, let's make that our theme of working harder, working smarter, not harder. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We do have a few questions that have come in, if you don't mind, and I'll share these. So one that came in from Liz Jones in Kalamazoo, Michigan. This is for you, Betsy. What strategies have you used to change the culture and move the career planning mindset forward? So this is a theme that has come up, but making that culture change. Are there any particular strategies that you've used to try to make that happen?
Yeah, I think one is that advisory where you're getting input from your stakeholders and making decisions and showing them the connection between the input that they gave and what you did as a result of that. And so I think one thing we wish we did was meet more regularly. We try to make it something that's not a huge commitment, so people are more likely to be a part of it. But the more we meet, the more we can hear their feedback and then make changes as we need to go. So I think that's part of it. And I think too, just remembering the mission of your school and the mission of your counseling department, and how are we making sure that every decision we make is to drive that mission statement forward, or to live out that mission statement. And I think the last thing is just, I really appreciate those reports you guys were just showing. Like, how can we share out that information more regularly? I was just thinking as you were sharing that, like, wow, if teachers knew these were our, preferred learning styles, and how are we integrating that into our teaching every day? Or these are I was looking at mine while you did that. I pulled mine up and saw some of the reports that I hadn't looked at in a little bit. And, artistic was one of the top ones. Are we giving students enough opportunities to be creative and artistic? And if that's something that, a good majority of them feel like is a skill that they have, or a personality style, or, how are we using the information to inform our teachers about our students? So I think that creates a culture that this is something we're all a part of. We're all on the same boat, rowing it, sometimes sinking, but then trying to row it together. And so giving everybody an oar so they all feel a part of it.
No, those are really, really great ideas. And it made me think back to something one of you said earlier about having senior administrators involved and being able to tie back to district mission, right? And it's, it's just hard to deny its importance if you have that buy-in at the highest levels. Plus it's, you can see the clear connection to what the district is all about, what the district is trying to accomplish. There's one here that I'll direct towards you, Kelsey. How do other high schools ensure that all Xello lessons are completed at a universal level? So getting that kind of completion across the board, it's a challenge.
Yeah, that is a challenge. That's one thing that we've continued to work on. And I think that the way that we've done that is, again, building it into like our social studies classes, or our health class, or our English classes, or making it a part of our orientation week, or making it a part of when we do an assembly. We have virtual assemblies, so kind of tying it into those. That giving them access removes the barrier. And if you're not reliant on just pulling them down and forcing them to do it when they're in front of you, again, many hands make light work. So figure out how you can utilize all of those hands to help our students. Because again, like, our missions should always be about all of the students getting those authentic experiences and doing that.
That's great. Oh, that's great. I'm going to squeeze in one more for you if I can really quickly, Kelsey. There's kind of a follow-on on that. This is from Jared Furman, who observes that at the middle school level, there are very specific learning expectations in his region around career development. But once students get to high school, those don't really exist. And so what are the other ways that you can get engagement with programming if you don't really have mandated activities? So they come into high school, the mandate is gone. How do we make sure that they continue to get that kind of access?
Well, I think then my question would kind of go back to, is it really systemically built in the middle school then? Like, really go back to what you have that realm of control over, and look at the way that your students are engaging in it in that middle level. I think that for us, like, I'm going to tackle onto Betsy's idea of what does advisory look like? How is this tied with SEL and, you know, not just independently on its own? I think that that's where you find the overlap, is where you can get that authentic engagement. And then if the middle school level, if they truly are engaged with it, not just going through your hoop, that should help transition that up to the high school. But I don't know, you know, it kind of depends on what your district's adoption is on that then.
That sounds great. That's great. Well, thank you so much. We are absolutely at time. And if we're going past time a little bit, that's of course my fault. So just wrapping up now, just want to say a couple of really quick things. So first of all, don't hesitate to contact us if we can help in any way. Our client solutions team is really amazing. We're very proud of them. We invest a lot in making them so knowledgeable, and they're just amazing people. So don't hesitate to email or contact them by phone. They would love to hear from you, if whatever your question may be. Also, if you would like to connect with us socially, there's lots of different ways that you can do that. We have a blog that's active with lots of content coming. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. You can connect with us on Facebook, as well as Twitter. Also want to just remind you that our last remote roundtable of the school year will be on May 19th at 3 p.m. and the focus is on building 4-year plans. So if you're thinking about getting ready for course planning next school year, this might be a good one to attend. And last thing is just making sure that you're aware of our help site, which is help.xello.world. Believe it or not, I have to be honest, this is the place where almost all of our staff go for information about Xello. It's an incredibly extensive knowledge base. Any questions you have, there's a very good chance that they'll be answered here in a very thorough and easily accessible way. So if you prefer self-help support, this is the place for you to go. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much to Kelsey, Betsy, and Julia. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your advice with us today. And that wraps our session for today. Thank you all for joining us, and all the best.